Welcome to Season 1 of The Chris Hanna Show, where we're going all in on how to improve your impact, your productivity, and performance. Today's podcast is brought to you by Evolving Management. Isn't it about time that companies and leaders rethink and evolve their approach to managing? Visit evolvingmanagement.com for featured content, blogs, manager toolkits, coaching solutions, and more. That's evolvingmanagement.com. Every decision we make, from the mundane to the monumental, has an impact on our lives, has an impact on others. Doesn't matter what we do, there are always consequences for every single decision that is made. Some choices are easier to make than others. As leaders, we often have to make tough decisions. The tough choices and decisions that we make are ones that we don't take lightly. In today's episode of The Chris Hanna Show, we're going to talk about some of these tough choices that leaders make and, what are some of the ways that you can handle making some of these tougher decisions. The reality is that a leader is only successful when their people are successful. But in order to make sure that the team is as successful as possible, decisions need to be made, both big and small, as a leader. When I talk to my teams or I've talked to others, I always talk about the importance of decision making. Some decisions are just going to be tough to make. It's going to be difficult to balance out the needs of your people versus the needs of the business. Those are two things that are always at odds with each other. And sometimes when you're trying to make tough decisions, while it might be idealistic to always want to make the best decision for your people, sometimes the business needs require tough choices to be made. Ultimately, you know what needs to be done from a business perspective, but there could be a situation where it negatively disrupts the flow of individual team members. There could be a decision made that is going to be unpopular, but it's the right call to make. That can be challenging to do. It can be a tough choice, but it's the right way to go. When tough choices are made and the results are difficult to achieve, that's when leaders really are forged. Sometimes you have to pay the price. You have to sacrifice or make a decision that's not popular. I've said numerous times before throughout my career that you want to be willing to do something because it matters. You don't want to do it just because it's going to get you noticed. You want to make sure you're making the right decision because that's the decision that needs to be made. Sometimes that means that instead of playing it safe, you're actually playing it smart. Now, the higher that people rise in an organization, the more rungs the ladder that they climb, the less that excuses are accepted, the more responsibilities and accountabilities are placed upon somebody. And so they're expected to make the tough call, to make the decision that best brings the organization or the team forward. Sometimes people need to make decisions that are tough or not popular. Those who want to be effective are often the ones who are willing to do what others won't do. A couple examples that I want to share with you in terms of tough choices that leaders might need to make. And I really would bucket them into two different categories. One would be people. The other I would call kind of structure choices. So from a people side, there's some tough choices that can be made because any decision where you're really starting to impact people, whether it's in their own personal life or then professionally within their careers, is difficult. So the first one I would say is deciding to add or remove somebody from the team can be a difficult decision. I say it's difficult to add somebody to the team because that's a decision that needs to be made with the utmost care. If you bring on the wrong person to a team, that's when you can see chaos start to ensue or additional drama start to pop up, or you see the team start to suffer because you've now accepted and compromised on bringing an individual who doesn't meet the standard of excellence that you were looking for in your team. So you have to make sure that you're making the right choice to add somebody to the group. But on the flip side, when it comes to removing somebody, and I think the term we might want to use that's most applicable here is, say, firing somebody, that decision is one of the most difficult ones to make for leaders. And it's difficult in the sense that there is an impact, and people who are making those decisions, they're doing so realizing that they're putting somebody out of work. They know that there might be some financial impact. They do so knowing that they're making the right decision for the business, but ultimately they're making a decision that's going to impact somebody on a personal level. That is a difficult thing to live with. Ultimately, you're impacting someone's world big time. I always say that the decision to let someone go should never be taken lightly. Throughout my career, I've really started to look at the decision to let somebody go as kind of having this thing where they hit this, what I call the triangle of impact, to determine whether it should be removed from the team. So by the triangle of impact, what I mean by that is, are they a liability? Do they hit in 3 pivotal points of this triangle? Are they a liability to our customers? Are they a liability to the team in general? And are they a liability to the organization? If you start to look at somebody's output, behavior, or just how they interact with others, and they hit all 3 of those points, now is the time to make a change. Now, I'm not saying that change is going to be easy in any way. No, it's definitely going to be tough. It's going to be a situation where you shouldn't feel happy about doing something like that, but you know deep down that it's the right call to make because they have hit that pivotal moment where they do impact all 3 points of the triangle. In addition to that, there are other people choices and things that you need to consider. From a hiring perspective, you want to make sure that you're bringing people in who are the right fit ultimately. This is something that, is... But as you're looking to add people to the team, you want to sit there and look at, do they add to the collective strengths of the group? Will they get along with everyone? Is there potential with them? You're finding out whether that person is the person that you thought that they are, and can they bring additional value to the team? Can they make the team better? It's a tough choice to make. Sometimes you might have a lot of candidates to choose from. Other times you might not have as many. In an earlier podcast, we talked about the post and pray method for recruiting and how a lot of companies will rely on just posting for a position and hoping and praying that the right person applies. And one of the things that is difficult in today's world for a lot of people who are hiring is that they are leaning so heavily on that method that they only get the best of who's applied, not necessarily the best person. So it can be a difficult choice for leaders to make in choosing who they should add to the team. Now, you also see that can be a similar situation when people are looking to promote folks as well. If you're adding via promotion, you want to make sure that you are adding the right person. And there are a lot of different factors that one needs to look at when they're making this tough choice because, how is the team going to react to this person getting a particular position within the group? There might be others who might have went against somebody in looking for a certain role. So as you start to think through some tough choices, there's a lot around the people side. And I think the 2 biggest buckets is on the whole adding and removing, side of the equation. In addition to that, though, the other huge bucket, as I said, was around structure in terms of some of these choices. As leaders, we need to make decisions, and we sometimes need to make decisions that are going to take the teams that we lead or the organizations that we lead in different paths. We might decide a certain strategy is more effective in one way to really achieve a certain level of success with our customers or to grow the business in a certain way. It might not be a popular decision, but it might be the decision that we've decided to take the company. Changing the structure or the strategy of the team, implementing a new strategy oftentimes results in a new structure to how people work, how they are interacting with one another, and that can be tough for people. This is especially true if team members are used to working in a certain way or having maybe a certain range of hours or tasks that they start to do. As you start to disrupt the natural flow of how things are done, there can be pushback, and that can be difficult for a leader to work through. And it's important that people understand the decisions that are made and why you chose the option that has been presented to them. A clear communication plan is essential when you are starting to roll out something big, with offering a certain level of consistent and appropriate messaging being just table stakes. It's important that leaders make sure that they are explaining the why behind any sort of change in direction, whether it's a direction in a new product line that's being offered or a new market that might be entered into. Leaders need to make sure that people know how this impacts them. And I think that's something that could help make the case for change better. make choices easier for people to implement if they take the time to ensure that everyone understands the why. A part of making great decisions or being perceived to make great decisions as a leader is that they are seen as someone who can make fair choices. As I've said, tough choices come along with the responsibilities of being a manager, and it's important to make sure that leaders find a way to make them well. Not all options, of course, are going to be popular, and the goal is that leaders need to be perceived as being fair in their decision making. So here's a couple ways to try and help make fairer choices. I think the first piece is to involve team members as best you can. Now, there's a certain level of discretion when it comes to this, in terms of allowing employee input into the decision-making process. You can ask for opinions. Doesn't mean you need to take those opinions, but at least asking for opinions and giving them some serious thought or consideration. There are many times throughout my career that I thought I've had a great idea, and it's not until I started having conversations with team members where I started to realize this idea maybe not fully baked, or there's an opportunity to tweak or pivot it, or think about it from a different lens. So getting feedback from the team can really help to make sure that people perceive the decision as being fair. In addition to that, it's important to make sure that there's really a thinking through of the process and having a plan. One thing to come up with an idea and come up with a strategy and communicate that, but it's another thing to actually have the plan to execute. Far too many plans are talked about, but nothing's really done to implement them the right way. So employees need to believe that decisions are made, are actually possible, but that the decisions are also something that's consistent with someone's behavior. They're based on a certain level of logic, and whether that is data-driven or some sort of accurate source of information. It's also important to make sure that if there are adjustments that need to be made, that those mistakes or those opportunities to course correct actually take notice. And to make sure that there's a process and a plan, communication side of it needs to make sure that it does happen in advance. So advance notice needs to be given to people when there is a significant change. Lastly, I would say the other part to making sure that the plan feels like something that people can get behind is making sure that people understand that that decision-making criteria is as transparent as possible. Far too often, decisions get made at upper echelons within organizations, and it doesn't feel like it's something that people can relate to or fully buy into because they don't trust the criteria maybe for why a decision is made. The more that people can actually talk through some of that and explain it, the more well received it will be. So it really comes down to that communication and messaging, again, of why the why is so critical. People need to understand that you don't need to know all the details, but you need to know enough to make sure that employees understand why a decision was made. As decisions get made, employees want to feel like they are respected as part of the process, so leaders need to make sure that they're offering a certain level of active listening to their concerns and empathizing with their point of view. My final thoughts on decision making and making tough choices is that every leader needs to realize is that you're not always going to make big decisions or choices. Some might be easier choices, or you might think might be easier choices, but some are definitely going to be tough. It's important that leaders make sure they weigh the pros and cons of decisions, and they plan for the possible reactions that they might get from whether it's team members, it's customers, or other stakeholders throughout the business. And it's important to make sure that they are preparing of how they're going to react to those scenarios. The more prepared they are, the better chances of success they will have. But as I said numerous times throughout this episode, is that communication planning is essential. If you don't have a good sense of how you're going to communicate any sort of decision or choice that's made, you are bound to run into resistance, and you have a good chance of failing. So when you're making tough choices, make sure you are doing what you need to do to set yourself up for success. You've been listening to The Chris Hanna Show. To have me speak at your next event, or for additional solutions to help you achieve more than you thought possible, visit chrishanna.ca today. For other solutions and resources designed to help companies and leaders rethink and evolve their approach to managing, be sure to check out evolvingmanagement.com. Lastly, please remember to subscribe and share to receive the latest episodes wherever you listen to your podcast. We look forward to connecting with you again soon for another episode of The Chris Hanna Show.